Welcome to the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bowhunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, editor Christian Berg.
All right, welcome back to the Bowhunting Podcast. All bowhunting, all the time. And today is going to be a great episode for all you who are listening who are DIYers, public land bow hunters, and whitetail fanatics, because we have got a great guest for you. We've got Steve Sherk, who's the owner of Sherk's Guide Service, and he actually specializes in public land whitetail hunts in Pennsylvania. If you're waiting for a punchline when I say that, there is none. He's dead serious. So this is going to be a great conversation. And I also have here with us Mr. John Silks, our gear editor, and actually the guy who gave me the idea for this episode because he knows Steve. So, gentlemen, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
So, John, I'm going to, almost be like a second guest for you today. I told you I'd let you direct this because when you told me about Steve and you said, hey, I got this buddy who specializes in public land whitetail hunts in Pennsylvania, I all but laughed in your face. And I said, nobody is paying money and traveling from some other state to Pennsylvania to hunt whitetails on public land. And you said, oh, yes, they are. And it piqued my curiosity. I'm sure it's piquing the curiosity of many people. I'm sure we have listeners who are fellow Pennsylvanians like we are, who are like, I'm typically going to Illinois or Kansas or Oklahoma or even Maryland, Delaware, anywhere but Pennsylvania. And then, of course, we have folks from all over the rest of the country who don't typically think of the Keystone State when it comes to big buck meccas around the country. So with that, John, I'll throw it over to you. You can sort of set the stage and start to ask Steve about how he got started with all this.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. So yes, I want to also say thanks for joining, Steve. Really appreciate it. I think I explained to you, and Christian probably knows a little bit about this, but one of my bucket lists has always been that I wanted to kill a Pope and Young buck on public land in Pennsylvania. The only problem is I stopped hunting public land like a long time ago. So that wasn't going to happen unless I started to actually get into it. So this year I decided to really start looking into public land hunting here in Pennsylvania and how I could maybe fulfill that dream and bucket list. And several times with local folks here that I talked to about hunting a lot, kept hearing this name, Steve Sherk, and I'm like, who's Steve Sherk? And so then I got got a little bit of introduction to you through that. My son even said, yeah, he's on Instagram, and I'm not a real big social media guy. I do a little bit on Facebook and stuff. But he's like, yeah, here, look at this, Dad. Look at these bucks. And I'm like, well, where are they from? And he said, Pennsylvania. I said, that's amazing. So I reached out to Steve, and I actually want to spend some time with Steve outside of this podcast as well. But Steve, Christian gave a little bit of an introduction, but I'm hoping that you can, maybe introduce yourself, tell the listeners who you are, where you're from, generally. You don't have to be too specific, and then a high level description of what your business is, and we'll get into some more details later.
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of give you an idea of, how I got started. It's one of those things in life, like I never thought I'd be doing this. This wasn't a plan of mine. It's something really cool, and I think it was just something that I didn't think was possible. But how it kind of happened was I was doing some writing for a magazine called Northwestern Pennsylvania Outdoors. And they wanted me to actually do a grouse hunting article about up here in northern Pennsylvania. This was back when I was 18. I'm 36 now, but back then it was as premier grouse hunting area as anywhere in the country, honestly. So I wrote that article about grouse hunting up here, and I'm not even much of a grouse hunter, but since deer and grouse kind of share a lot of the same habitat, I knew a lot about grouse and the areas that they liked. So I wrote that article, and it must have been a couple of weeks after it got released. I just got flooded with emails and phone calls for guys wanting to come grouse hunting here. So I became all of a sudden grouse guide. And I mean, that was a lot of fun. It was really cool and exciting. But as I started doing it for a couple of years, I'm like, I'm not even a super passionate grouse hunter. If I'm going to guide, I'd like to do what I'm most passionate about is whitetails. So, a couple of years into it, I started guiding whitetails. And honestly, it was one of the biggest challenges of my life as far as getting people to come to public land, Pennsylvania. I actually, the first couple of years, took a few people out for free, just trying to get something started. And it was a slow start, but here I am, literally, like I said, I've probably been doing this since I was 20, 21 years old. So roughly 15 years later. And the past 3 or 4 years, I've actually been I book out in like a month or so. So it's gone from a huge challenge to finally having some success. And, I'm just super happy, and the good Lord's definitely blessed me.
Yeah, very good. I always tell people, if you can find a Pennsylvania hunter that can be successful on public land, you found one of the best hunters in the nation. I mean, it's not, as you know very well, Christian knows now too. I mean, shooting a public land, a good mature buck on public land in Pennsylvania is extremely difficult. Now, of course, everything can come together and line up, and it just happens. But and every once in a while, you'll see this new hunter who goes and plops down out in the middle of the woods and gets lucky. But to do it consistently, in my opinion, that's as good of a hunter as you'll find, because you've gotta know what you're doing. So did you grow up around hunting?
Yep. I grew up, in a huge hunting family. We had the traditional hunting camp, which is still going today. In fact, just being surrounded by such passionate hunters in my family, I probably wouldn't be who I am today. It really sparked so much interest and excitement at a young age. My first time deer hunting, I must have been 6 or 7 years old, obviously not carrying a weapon, but just tagging along with my dad. And it's just, it's one of those things where, I feel like, we all have things that we were just, it's kind of like born into our blood. And I feel like deer hunting's been that. But growing up into that, that atmosphere and a strong tradition like that had a big effect on who I am today as a deer hunter.
Absolutely. I completely get that. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 54 now. And I grew up, when I think about, my beginning in hunting, it was all about, going to my pap's that, the morning before the first day, and he's, cooking up bacon, you smell like bacon and eggs.
Yeah.
And that was just like, that was hunting, right? And, you go out and all decked out in your orange and go sit somewhere out in the middle of the woods. And
I hear you.
such good memories, right? And I mean, Pennsylvania is so just deep with tradition around, deer hunting. It's it just runs deep in so many families and just the state in general.
Yeah, and along those lines, I got to jump in, John, to piggyback on that, because there's a great heritage of deer hunting in Pennsylvania, but for a lot of that history, like you mentioned, your grandfather, for a lot of that generation, and even our parents' generation when they were getting started, our heritage had to do a lot with high deer numbers, but not a lot of real deer quality. And I'm sitting here looking at Steve with all those mounts behind him, and I'm like, man, did you kill all those whitetails on public land in Pennsylvania? And I don't want to jump the gun because I'm sure we'll get into it, but people, I mean, you got to tell me right now, people are wondering like, okay, this guy's guiding on public land in PA, but how much quality can I actually expect to see? How big are these deer? Tell me about some of the scores or the age on some of these deer that you're chasing here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Actually, I've never killed a deer on private land in my life. I was just born into an area that, if it's just public land, is what it is. There's not even much private land here anyway. So, just I talked about the being brought into a tradition. That's what my grandfather, uncles, cousins, like that's been the way, just hunting public land. All the deer on my wall, other than 2 or 3, are all Pennsylvania deer. 2 or 3 are public land, New York, which is, our camp is only a couple miles from New York. So actually some of the deer that we find in Pennsylvania by our camp actually live in both states because we're so close to the border. But, we, being big woods, public land, I mean, yeah, you get the occasional 160, 170, 180, but a really good deer here is 120, 140 inch deer. And that's a deer that I'm not going to pass up. For me, and especially a lot of guys, it's more about getting a mature deer so much than the score, especially in big woods, like in public land. If you can kill a 4, 5, 6-year-old deer in this scenario, that's, being highly pressured, extremely intelligent, and has learned a lot over the years, like, just killing a deer of that age class is a huge accomplishment. So I think we focus, more on that than the actual score. But I mean, the bigger, the better too, for me. I love big antlers, and you can see I've been fortunate to get a few nice ones here. So it's definitely, we definitely have a product here that a lot of people will be looking for.
And are there more of those bigger deer now than there were when you were a kid, do you think?
Oh my God. Yeah. It's completely different. Like when like I said, I brought up when I was, 6, 7 years old hunting with my dad. Back then it was all about seeing a lot of deer, and there really wasn't any standards as far as antlers. Like maybe a lot of guys wouldn't shoot a spike, but if it had a fork, it was like, holy cow, that's a shooter. But you might see 40, 50, 60 deer in a day. And right. A lot of times, honestly, out of all those deer, you wouldn't even see any antlers. No. But then, I give huge credit to Gary Alt. As soon as he introduced his plan, I mean, I know a lot of hunters, maybe you're still in disagreement with it, but it definitely changed the whole deer hunting, at least up in my area. We have a lot less deer now, but we have tremendous quality. It's just even a lot of 2 and 3-year-old deer are way more healthier now, bigger bodied, and already starting to show better antlers than, what you used to see back there, and basically before the 2000s came in.
Yeah, I remember looking at my pap's wall, just a typical Pennsylvania hunter, and he would have like a whole wall full of racks. And, there's a lot of tons of basket rack 8s. And then there was, like 1 or 2 that were like just a bit bigger, kind of like, holy cow, that's giant. Back then, I thought they were giant. They maybe were like 105 inches,
Yeah.
But I like, holy cow, like I would love to see a buck that big, because you just didn't, and I think the term brown, if it's brown, it's down. I think it originated in some camp in Pennsylvania.
I believe it.
That's just the way things were. But when Alt did that, made those changes, there's a local paper that always does like the, just sort of pictures of all the, bucks that people, bring in and show off and stuff. And you can see from, years before Alt till years after Alt, there's just, it's all you need is that paper to show what he's done, because it's amazing the difference.
Absolutely. And it also, right or wrong, it pushed a lot of hunters away, especially, some of your older guys that were just so set in their ways, hunting the same stand every year, just all about seeing a lot of deer and, that kind of situation. Now it's more of a hunter's game now. You got to put a lot more work into it. But if you're really passionate about that kind of hunting, I mean, it's so much more rewarding when you have that kind of mindset. So, like I said, I'm not in any disagreement with how Pennsylvania has changed. I know we got a lot less deer up here than what we used to, but I mean, I'll take big deer over seeing a lot of deer any day. So I couldn't be happier with what we have.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love the change. I love the fact that, I can go out and just know that there's potential there.
Exactly.
If I get one or not, that's another matter. But just to know that the potential is there, just, I don't know, it changes how I feel when I'm hunting.
Absolutely.
Well, it gets you out of bed in the morning when you know that there's a good buck to hunt. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Now, I want to get into some of the tactics that you use for hunting these deer, because I'm sure it's different than what I would do in farm country where I more typically hunt. But before we dive into that, I wanted to kind of set the stage. Public land in Pennsylvania, there is an awful lot of it. And so as you guys were talking, I was like, man, one thing that Steve doesn't have to deal with.
You're blowing up my schedule here. You're getting
too bad. If Steve was out in Illinois or Kansas or Missouri, he'd be competing against a whole bunch of other outfitters to lease up these little farms, 200 acres here, 100 acres there, 300 acres there, and he'd be paying big money to do that. And here in Pennsylvania, I bet you don't have much competition from other outfitters because there's probably not a ton. And I actually Googled it, John. So if anyone's blowing up your schedule, it's Google. Because I knew we had like 2 million acres just of state game lands. But then it says there's another 2.2 million acres of state forest. And then there's 500,000 acres of national forest, which the Allegheny National Forest is a lot of, and then another almost 300,000 acres of state parks. So you add it all up. I mean, I think we're over 5 million acres of public land around Pennsylvania. So you don't have to worry about finding somewhere to stick a tree stand, do you, Steve?
Oh, absolutely not. And actually, there's even way more public land than what you're going to find in your little search there. There's tons of public land that's owned by like timber companies and oil and gas companies that, they don't want a lot of deer as it is, especially the timber companies, because, obviously deer are one of their huge enemies when it comes to, forest management. So there's even hundreds of thousands of acres of those areas. We're just definitely truly blessed in Pennsylvania to be able to have so many options and so much room to roam that it's just for a public land do-it-yourself hunter. I don't know if there is a place much better than this anywhere in the country.
Well, jump in there, John. You want to get back on schedule.
I'm just waiting. I thought you had asked a different,
Well, I mean, I'm curious. Obviously, it's big woods. You have a lot of unbroken timber, Steve, and
yeah.
Not a lot of edge. When I think of hunting whitetails, again, like I live in Schuylkill County, it's a mix of mining, ag, and just forest. And so there's a lot of edge. You have edge between ag fields and forests, edge between mined areas and fields, thicker, brushy areas, of reclaimed mine land. And deer love those edges. When you get up into places where there's thousands upon thousands of contiguous acres of forest, your strategies and tactics are going to be probably a little bit different than mine. And I always find it a bit overwhelming personally, to go to an area like an Allegheny National Forest, you're on this big mountain and there's 20 trails along that ridge that run over the mountain. How do I figure out which trail the buck is coming over today versus tomorrow? Because they all look kind of the same to me.
So, so back that up a little bit. And how I was going to bring into this was, some people are starting, from scratch, right? I mean, hunting public land has become a lot more popular just in recent years. And honestly, even for me, like I said, I haven't been hunting public land I grew up hunting public land, but then I got away from that. And, but I'm just getting back to it. And like Christian said, that, just jumping into it for me or anybody else that's just like saying, hey, I want to give this a try. And you look at those 5 million acres, how do you even find how do you, where do you start? Right. I mean, I know that, you've run huge trail camera, studies and all that, but, are you boots on the ground, Google Maps, how do you even get started to find the place that's worth looking into? Because I know some just getting away from people isn't always the answer, because there's some places in Pennsylvania that the genetics just aren't there, and you could search all you want and you're going to find, just your typical average small buck.
Yep. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are probably more into like Google Maps, like you said, and, finding their starting points, from the satellites. But I've kind of had to learn to evolve in a different kind of style, because the way I look at it is hunting such highly pressured land and a lot of competition from other hunters. If we're all like focusing on clear cuts and, terrain features, the more I do that, the more hunters I run into. So I've definitely become more of a boots on the ground type of hunter and scouter. And it's it's just one of those things too, where being born here and living, I literally live right in the heart of where I hunt. I can go out my door and be in a good hunting area right at my house or my camp. But it's really just been getting to know areas better and better throughout the years, having a lot of different options. I would say if because you're probably, a lot of your listeners aren't going to be in my situation, and they're hoping to hear something like, okay, I want to start hunting public land, but how do I find like a starting point? There's probably two keys that I would say are most important: is try to predict easy access and highly pressured areas. Like I always have said that it doesn't matter what kind of attractants you use. It doesn't matter what food sources are there, anything like that. Hunting pressure, and especially talking about mature bucks, his security at all times is number one on his mind. Like he's always going to make all his decisions based on where hunting pressure and threats to his life are. So, I try to avoid a lot of easy access or areas that with a lot of different roads and that are more attractive to hunters. You want to try to be a little bit different and find areas that are more difficult to get to. I think that's a huge key. But if you are going to look on maps, I would say focus on areas that show like good diversity of habitat. You don't want to just hunt like plain hardwoods, or I like to have areas that maybe have a little bit of clear cut, that have terrain features, a lot of ridges, points, good water sources. Like you want to find some good diversity, because deer are, like say you have a good acorn year and everyone thinks, well, the deer are just eating acorns. Well, they're never just eating acorns. They're mainly just browsers. They always like to have many items on their buffet and have a good variety of different things where they live. So I would say focus on areas that look like they have, good diverse habitat, and definitely try to avoid areas that seem likely to get a lot of hunting pressure.
Okay. So do you, you mentioned terrain features, do you look at, do you find that draws that lead down to water, are good areas? And if so, do they, do deer bed on the points and travel at the, at the top of the draws? And, there's a million and one, things out there to tell you how to look at features and how deer travel and all that kind of stuff. When you go out and you put your cameras, which again, I'll mention, I'm pretty sure I heard that you did some pretty interesting studies with your cameras. Yeah. Do you just put it on a trail? Do you put it at the top of, do you pick where you think a buck might go versus where a doe might go? And do you put out anything, like, I know you're not big into attractants, but do you do I know one of the big things is putting out mock scrapes, which really it's more about the licking branch than the scrape itself. Do you put up, licking branches, and that kind of thing to sort of, to concentrate your camera on, or how do you choose what you do?
Yep. Well, first, because I think we got a couple different questions in that conversation. I'm focusing mainly in the upper part of the mountains. I'm hunting all mountainous terrain. 95% of your bedding is going to be up high, and doe buck, it doesn't matter. So that really helps to eliminate a lot of area when you got all these ridges and valleys, but then you can kind of eliminate all that lower ground and focus on on the higher ground. I think that's a big key in these big tracts of public land. Is it's actually easier to start eliminating areas than to pinpoint. It seems like once you start eliminating a lot of stuff, then you're like, okay, now I've got a lot less options here, but those are good key options you start to find. So I focus on that higher terrain where the deer are in the daytime. And then as far as, camera placement and, picking stand sites, all that, yes, is pretty much based on what I'm seeing on my cameras. Mostly all my cameras are on mock scrapes or natural scrape. Natural scrape can be just as good. Like,
Sure.
especially for scrapes, you just get hit year after year and you kind of just can rely on them. I like to hunt if I find good thick cover, and not always like a clear cut, but like good patches of beach brush. Probably 50% of the time I'm on what they call like a leeward side. Like most of our predominant winds are south and westerly, so I kind of factor that in to focus on some of those leeward side ridges and mountaintops. I love to hunt and set up in areas that have a good high stem count. Especially we haven't had a good acorn crop in a couple years, so I find that even around like bedding, deer they're eating all day. It's especially it's not so much here like a bed to feed pattern. Like some of the most eating and feeding sign you'll find, it's in some of these bedding areas. And so lately I've focused on good regrowth, high stem count areas, upper parts of the mountains. And you also got to base it on the sign you're seeing too.
Did you say high step or stem?
Stem count, like, good understory, a lot of browse,
Gotcha.
that kind of stuff.
Like just coming from, out of the blue and looking at this, I really kind of started to focus on the mock scrapes licking branches. So what's the anatomy of how you set that up? Let's say you're going out in the woods and you're like, hey, I really like this spot. How do you actually go about doing that? Like, what's your process?
Yep. Well, most of my mock scrapes are made in the spring and early summer, even sometimes late winter. I find that the longer you can give that scrape to get established, the better the results you have, literally into the upcoming season. It's like, I think it's overlooked on how much all deer, not just mature bucks, but like they see something in their house and they'll remember it forever. Like you might have a buck just passing through an area, through maybe the early spring, he finds your mock scrape, and even if he doesn't show up all throughout the spring and summer, next fall, he will remember that. So the longer you can give that scrape time for deer to find it, the better. Plus they, it's something new to their area, and not every deer will pick up on that like as if that scrape has been there for 5 or 10 years. It's a new thing, and the deer sometimes have to get comfortable with it. So giving those scrapes a lot of time definitely has been a huge factor towards my success with mock scrapes. Also, I love to use what they call beech limbs, which is, beech trees, beech brush. The reason why I like beech limbs for my licking branch is they will hold their leaves for like up to a year. And I've found that leaves on your licking branch are like an added attraction. I think the deer, they like to nibble on them a little bit more. I think the leaf can hold scent a little bit better. And like you try pulling on a beech leaf, like it's like it basically feels like it's glued to the limb. They're very, very durable. They, like I said, the leaves will hold on there for like up to a year, and they're way more attractive when you have some leaf color on it. I've done studies where I've had just a plain stick or limb hanging down right next to a beech limb, and they'll hit that beech limb almost 90% of the time. And oak works really well too. There might be areas where hunters don't have beach, but you want to use a limb that will hold the leaf for a long time after you've cut it.
So are you hanging that so that, is there a, sort of like a bare stick at some point, or is all the leaves downward? How do you how do you flip that around?
I try to mimic like a real active scrape. Most of the time will have a vertical licking branch because it gets used so much that it kind of breaks somewhat and it bends over. So that deer are especially looking for that, all the time. So that vertical branch, once again, it's like, okay, the deer see that, and okay, we got a scrape to check out. But I try to keep more of the leaves down lower on the licking branch versus up high, and there's really no big need for that, except for the fact that if you have a lot of leaves on the branch, you can't always see a buck's antlers good on camera. So I find that if I keep the leaves down low, his antlers aren't all, blended in with the leaves. Other than that, though, it really doesn't matter. You can do it the other way. But you, as long as you have a little cluster of leaves on that branch, that's really all that you need.
Yeah.
And also, you brought it up. I'm not going to say that scents don't work, but I just believe that, especially in public land, I think some of these bucks are extremely smart and weary that I don't like. Once I've created a scrape, I really like to just stay away from it. I mean, I might have a camera, 10, 15 feet away, but I don't like to, be putting scent on that might not be quite what a buck, is used to. And also once you get these mock scrapes going enough, the deer are hitting them so regularly that they're constantly putting their own scent on there. And I mean, what more could you ask for than deer putting their own natural scent on it? So I think it's, that's the thing about, in all industries, but especially this hunting industry, is you watch enough TV and read a lot and you can get sold on something pretty easily. And there's probably more gimmicks out there than what we really need to be buying into. Once again, I'm not saying scent doesn't work, but if you got deer hitting that scrape almost every day, why not just stay back and let the deer do the work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I made my first vine branch, licking branch here not too long ago. Matter of fact, Christian and I were getting ready to leave that day, and I pulled my hamstring coming out of the. So Christian had to baby me all the way to frickin' Montana, and the poor guide had to deal with me. But I was riding an e-bike back in, and when I was coming out, I stepped off of it wrong and just blew my hamstring. Just a dumb move. But anyway, the point is that it was hard for me setting up that licking branch to not put scent on it, because naturally I'm thinking, why would they come to this thing without it? But I just went and got my camera yesterday, my card, and within, there were deer going all around it and looking at it for the first day. And the second day, a doe, stuck her nose right up there and started rubbing her head on it. And then a buck came in and did the same thing. And I was like, it works. You don't need to put scent on it, because they just come to it for whatever reason. They see that vertical line. And like you said, now I'm so glad I didn't put any scent on it, because all the scent on it now just.
Yeah, John, I think John froze up. Are you seeing him, Steve?
I lost him for a little bit. I was worried it was, but I'm glad I'm at least hanging in there.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just you and me until John gets his connection figured out. So, man, out of all these cameras and all these scrapes, and I don't think you actually put a number on it, so I'm curious, how many mock scrapes are you running during the spring and summer?
Around 150. It will give and take. Like sometimes I might have close to 170, and then sometimes I'm pulling a lot of them and moving them around where it might drop into the 130. So I always say usually around 150 cameras. and it's in about 100,000 acre patch of land. I kind of cluster them in, some like key areas. It's not like they're all spread out in a line through that 100,000 acres. I don't know if you know, but some of the studies I do are, based on like movement and weather and temperature and those kind of factors. I not only use these for hunting purposes to gather like intel for the season, but this massive amount of trail cameras that I'm using, I've learned over the years there was so much data and information that I wasn't really paying attention to and just kind of throwing away. And so now, the past 4 or 5 years, I've really gotten into recording data and movements and things like that. And it's definitely taught me a tremendous amount, about deer movement.
Okay, so that's very, very interesting. So are you basically taking all of these images and charting times, temperatures, wind directions, moon phases or positions? What are the key metrics that you're looking at? And then, I don't think we have time to go into everything you've learned by any means, right? That could be a whole nother show in itself. But what are some of the trends that you've identified in looking at that data?
Yeah. Well, after the first few years of doing it, like the first few years, I was keeping track of all kinds of stuff, but it became pretty evident that I was finding that temperature was the biggest key to movement. And my study only goes from October 1st to December 10th. Basically, all I'm interested in is movement during the Pennsylvania hunting seasons. So basically, I'll go from all of archery to the end of gun season. But some of the biggest keys that I found, and it might not be that unexpected, but cold fronts definitely, especially those mid to late October cold fronts, tremendous movement. That whatever you got to do, like to get out of work or whatever, don't try not to make plans other than being in the deer woods during those October cold fronts. Also, like a couple of key things that we found are hunting pressure. Like when bear season comes in Pennsylvania, our movement just drops dramatically. It doesn't matter whether, nothing matters then. Over the past probably 5 to 10 years, we're getting more bear hunters up here than we are deer hunters. It's really becoming a huge thing, and it just seems like all those hunters in the woods just shuts down the movement tremendously. And the same even with our gun season, a huge decrease in movement where years ago it just seemed to be a little bit different until more per se of the bear situation. Like when we didn't have a lot of this bear pressure, we used to see a lot more rutting activity in bear season. But it's, a lot of it's changed just based on hunting pressure. So the temperature and hunting pressure seem to be the biggest keys what I'm finding to deer movement in this area.
Are the bear hunters getting all the way back into your most remote areas? Are those bucks affected as well?
Absolutely. Yep. There's bear hunters all over the place. And also like bear and deer, once again, share a lot of the same habitat. Like one of the biggest strategies for bear hunting is, pushing clear cuts and thickets, and the deer love those areas too. So once they start doing those drives in those areas, it just seems like, those deer go completely nocturnal. And that's something I want to make sure I touched on this right, that I'm only keeping track of daytime movement. I always get way more nighttime movement. No, it doesn't matter the time of year. You're always going to get usually more nighttime movement than daytime movement. That's just how deer are in general, especially on public land. But I only keep track of daytime movement, and it's just amazing. Once bear season comes in, it's just like a light switch. Those deer, even though they're not being hunted, they really can't tell that. They're just noticing all the human activity, and it just seems like it's had a huge effect on our gun season because it's those deer are just so nocturnal to hunt once gun season comes.
Have you noticed any difference in, so for instance, like, the bigger bucks, are you finding them up high in the rocks versus, other places? Or, I mean, are there terrain features that you notice more activity or more bucks or anything like that from?
Not so much terrain features, but cover is king. If you have thick cover in any area, you gotta focus on that cover. They are so attracted and so cover is so much of a need in their lives that it's hard to really hunt those deer, except maybe outside of when you get into that early November period when they're just so rutted up, and you might even see them in someone's backyard cruising or something. But other than like that one little week of the rut, they're really focused on staying in cover. Like I said, remote, non-pressured areas are still always going to be really good. But I don't really focus on terrain features until I find cover or sign, or I'm getting good pictures in an area. Then I might use the terrain to narrow things down a little bit more to try to funnel that movement a little bit better. But a lot of hunters ask me that question all the time, and it seems like so many are looking for terrain features as a starting point, but it does not seem to work for me. You got to focus on good habitat and plan getting away from the pressure.
Well, that's very, very helpful, because it seems like terrain features are you can identify them, right? So it like gives you a feeling that you've got something, that you're starting somewhere. And you mentioned the cover, and Christian earlier mentioned edges. He's been successful focusing on edges. And I think that's true no matter if you're down, in southern Pennsylvania where it's more woodlots and things like that, or Christian's out in eastern PA and he's got some big woods and some farmland. Do you find that once you identify that cover, are you then hunting those edges where that cover meets? I mean, are you going traipsing right into the thick?
Preferably, I'd like to get into the thick. It just depends on knowing how that area is used for bedding, like literally knowing where, if you're hunting buck bedding in cover, like a lot of us know that like bucks just don't randomly lay down in places. They have their actual beds. So in the postseason, I really try to learn those bedding areas very well. That way I already know where the beds are. And one of my favorite tactics is getting in the bedroom, but like getting in between two beds, because a buck will lay in one bed for maybe an hour or so, get up and feed and work his way to another. I found that the edges, I mean, they can be good, but those bucks are so stubborn, especially up here, that they do not like to leave that cover until after the sun goes down. So it seems like if you get in, your chances increase, dramatically. But another challenge so quickly on getting in there is a lot of these areas are so thick that it's so hard to sneak in there quietly with all that brush, rubbing on you. So you have to play it out just right. A lot of times you just can't get in. You got to focus on the edges and hope that, something will exit early one evening. But there's no, if someone thinks there's like a surefire guaranteed tactic to go out there in 3 days on public land and kill a buck, like a mature buck, I'm telling you, it's like a 1 out of every 50 hunts it happens. It's a very challenging situation.
So, well, along those lines, I'm jumping in, John. Step aside. I got a question. Because I got to, because we've been going for a while now. I mean, we're coming up on an hour and 10 minutes, and I haven't even heard about the actual hunting. I might want to book a hunt with this guy, John, and I want to know a couple things, okay? Because he's been running 170 cameras all summer. He's got 1 million mock scrapes out there. He's probably got 317 tree stands, or at least spots for stands that he knows about. And I want to know when he's like, all right, Christian, I've been doing all this work. Now we're sending you to the stand. Is it going to be a 5-mile walk to my stand? And when I get there, are you going to say, now, look, you're not going to see a lot of deer. You might be lucky to see one deer if you sit there for 3 days, but it's probably going to be that buck that we're after. And if he comes within 50 yards, you better get him killed because you ain't going to see him again. Or is it actually a lot better than that?
Yeah, it's more of, you're not going to probably see as many deer here as what you might see in private land, farm ground, or other places in the country like the Midwest. it's more of a mind game out here. You have to be very like patient, strong-minded. You can't get frustrated. Even the terrain will beat up on your mind because you're just getting beat up in every direction. Like big hikes, just steep mountains. It's not a easy. I'm not saying deer hunting's easy, but this is probably at the higher class of the challenge than the other places in the country. There's times you'll hit it just right, and you might see 5 or 6 bucks on a sit. Or like last year, we had a guy. He came in late October, and it was really just the weather. We had a real warm October, but he came for a week and never saw a deer for a whole week. And I was like, we'll never see that guy again. I felt bad, but it was just a slow time. Then he came, he just randomly called. He's like, because I post a lot on social media, posting pictures, and I think that just like draws people in, or they know that I have what they want. So he came back in like second week in November, sat 20 minutes and killed the biggest buck of his life on the first sit. So like the guy comes for a week, sees nothing, and then he hits it just right. Like, it's very unpredictable here. You just got to know. We touched on a little bit earlier. We know that the deer here, we know we have big deer. We have a lot of history with these deer, and it's just all about putting the time in and hunting hard. And you just really don't know what to expect.
Yeah, it's a credit to that guy for coming back, because most people, like you said, if I came and hunted with you for a week and didn't see a deer, I'm probably not calling you 2 weeks later asking if I can come back. But on the flip side, John and I just returned from Montana, and we know all about, quote unquote, catching it just right, because we had 6 days of elk hunting and never had a shot opportunity. We had to leave because the outfitter had another group of clients coming in. And on the very first day with the new group of clients, they shot 2 elk. So, were those guys? No, I don't know who they are. Maybe they really are way better elk hunters than John or I. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. I'm going to say that switch that we were waiting our whole hunt to flip. Every day we got up and we're like, maybe the rut is going to turn on today. Maybe today, maybe today. Well, guess what? It turned on right after we left. Your guy who came back, that activity turned on, and he was there. Just like you said, it's all about time. It doesn't, it's funny. I came home and I was talking to my wife about our hunt, and I said, it does you no good to be out there 30 days in a row on the wrong 30 days if you're not going to be there for the 5 good days, and so you just have to keep going.
Yep. And like I touched on the weather, like when that guy was here, like we were talking like late October, most days were 60s, 70s, mornings were high 40s, 50s. Like you could just tell it just didn't feel right out there. And you can go anywhere in the country, the most prime places, but if the conditions don't line up right for you, you're going to have a difficult hunt. I'm not saying you can't have success, but it definitely has an impact on your chances. And you just got to hope, when you're not even just traveling, hunting, but at home, whatever, like if you're able to focus your efforts on like better conditions, perfect times, you're going to have way more success doing it that way than, hunting some of those less premier days.
Like you said, don't miss those cold fronts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what's so crazy about, you might want to have me back sometime and I can go over, some of my studies. Like, it's just amazing when you start documenting weather, how much it has an impact on deer movement. And like, I feel bad, but like, going into the guiding season, I can look ahead and already kind of predict how a guy's hunt's going to be just looking at the weather. Like if I see, all those warm temps and not much of especially another huge factor is when you just have stagnant weather, especially if it just stays warm day after day, you're not getting rain, just that real dry, calm weather. Like I feel bad, but I don't have usually the flexibility to tell them, you can come another time because I got a whole nother group coming the next week. But it's like, man, I feel bad. You're probably not going to have the most fun hunt here, but I can't control the weather. So
yeah, do you actually tell them that? You'd be like, hey man, welcome. Here's your room. Gonna have some good food. Your hunt's probably gonna suck.
I mean, I do try to let people know, hey, no, that is actually a good point. I try to let them know what I think and what to expect coming into it, especially when it's not looking good, because I certainly don't want to tell someone the opposite and say, man, you hit it just right and your first sit's just going to be unbelievable. I'd rather let him know the truth and what to expect than play with his mind and then him not seeing what I told him he was going to see. So it's just, like I said, it's just part of hunting. The weather is definitely one of your, it can be your best friend or your biggest enemy. That's for sure.
Well, yeah. I tell you what, I'll give it back to you in a second, John, but I find it interesting. You got Bill Winke out in Iowa. Bill's one of our field editors, has been writing for us forever in like the classic picture perfect, greatest deer hunting you can find anywhere. And then you got Steve on public land in Pennsylvania where you got to fight and scratch and claw for every opportunity. And they're both saying the same exact thing because Bill Winke is Mr. October cold front and he lives and dies by that. And so it just goes to show it doesn't matter where you're hunting whitetails. You hunt those cold fronts, and like Steve said, you find an excuse to have the flu that day and get out in the tree because, you can catch up on your work on a hot day or a rainy day or a 40-mile-an-hour wind day, but you need to be out there on that cold front day and maybe the day after because that's when those deer are going to be on the move.
Yep. I always tell people that the only way you're not going to catch me out there on a cold front is during my own funeral. So that's about the truth.
Yeah, my own funeral. I like it. Well, Christian, I think that, maybe in the future we could get Steve back to really get into some depth on those camera studies. But I think that, anybody that's listening and or watching and wants to do public land, I think there's a little bit more reality there. After talking to Steve, I know there is for me. I was really focusing on features, Steve, and I'm going to start to go back to my areas and look for diversity in cover and water and food and things like that. And maybe I might use those features where they intersect with that
exactly.
That diversity, but just going out and finding those features without anything else is probably would burn up a lot of time and futility.
Yep. And that's the thing, like here in these mountains, there's thousands and thousands of key terrain features. So like you're going to check a lot of these, key saddles and benches and draws. But once you get in there, it's like, there's really nothing that attractive here for the deer. Like, maybe a few times during the rut, a buck just might get funneled through that area, but it's not going to hold deer consistently. And that's kind of what you want is if you talk to anyone, like especially on private land that manages deer and habitat, like it's all about habitat and not pressuring your deer. And that's the same for public land. The better the habitat, the better life you can give those deer. That's where they're going to be. So and it makes it fun because it's more of it. Like I said, it's more of a boots on the ground type of scouting. You get to go in there and kind of figure it out, and it just makes it a little more challenging and fun, in my opinion.
Much more rewarding when you get that buck on the ground, no doubt.
Yep. So Steve, there's some people who are listening and they're like, I am that, strong-willed, strong-minded guy. I want to take this public land challenge. How long are your hunts? And honestly, what do they cost? Because people are going to be curious. What is it? If I'm like, I want to go hunt with you, Steve, what's the deal?
Yep. We do 3 and 6 day hunts with meals and lodging. We don't do lunch just for the fact that we really don't believe in much of going back to camp for lunch, especially in the areas we hunt where you might have an hour walk in or once you're out there, you're out there. So we do breakfast and dinner, meals and lodging included. in my opinion, very reasonable. A 3-day hunt's $875 and a 6 days, $1,500. I will say, it's not even a selling pitch, but in this situation, really anywhere deer hunting, it's very difficult to have success in 3 days. I would totally spend the extra money and do a 6-day hunt versus a 3-day. It just seems like, you don't even have time to get settled in here in 3 days and just kind of get used to the atmosphere. If you're someone that, wants a little more of a challenge, really wants to test your skills, I'm not the kind of guy that holds your hand and is going to make every decision for you. A lot of our hunts are we just give you waypoints, and when you come back at the end of the day, every next hunt is based on what you saw that day. So we probably cater better to a do-it-yourself mindset versus an amateur that needs help in every way. So it's definitely it's going to be rewarding for you, because you're going to have a lot of effect on your own success. So like I said, I may not be in the most premier state, but we definitely have deer here that are probably as good as a lot of other places in the country, and I've had a lot of happy clients over the years.
Well, and for your prices are very reasonable if you look at what a Midwest guided whitetail hunt costs. So honestly, you talk about don't do the 3, don't do the, do the 6. And I'm calculating it out. I'm like, wait, for the price of one like Missouri deer hunt, I could actually do the 18-day hunt with Steve, and then I figure in 18 days, I'm either going to be like desperately wanting to go home or I'm going to fill my tag. And either way, I'm ready to head out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's, and here's the thing. If you calculate a 3-day versus a 6-day, I'm actually making more of a profit percentage on a 3-day than the 6-day. So as a business standpoint, I'd probably be better off doing all 3 days, but it's not all about the money for me. It's about, quality and having success. And I'm just giving my honest opinion. You're much better off doing a 6-day than a 3-day.
And just being an outfitter and getting to meet all those people and having that camp atmosphere and just, that's got to be awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously I know a lot of our clients can say that, but for me, like, I've met people all over the country. I've heard so many amazing deer stories, from crazy things to successful hunts. Like, I have had so much joy out of this in so many ways, other than just, putting people in good spots. It's been and even situations like this, like, if I wasn't in this, in this industry, I probably would never be chatting with guys like you. So it's just been a really cool thing. And it's been a huge blessing, and I'm extremely thankful for it.
Very good.
So Steve, if people want to get a hold of you or, connect with you, where can they find you? Are you on, social media platforms? And again, it's Sherk's Guide Service. Is that what people should search up? Maybe you have a website or whatever.
Yep. Let's just get right to the point too. If anyone's listening, don't take it the wrong way, but I am fully booked this year. Like, I don't know why, honestly. I get so many people like wanting to book a hunt. Like, probably on average, I get about 10 calls a day, and I can't even keep up with calling all these people. That's just calls. I get emails and messages on social media. So I'm already fully booked for this year. I definitely want to hear from you eventually. But please wait till after hunting season. We'll start booking hunts for 2023 around the new year. So please contact me then. It's just going to be social media as far as where you can contact me. It's Sherk's Guide Service on Facebook or Instagram. Like I said, we usually have a pretty good return rate, but I'm always able to take, a few new hunters here and there. So you don't want to wait too long. Like, I think last year I was pretty much fully booked within like 3 weeks. So get a hold of me right around the first of the year, and usually I can get someone in if they hit me at the right time.
And Sherk is with an E, not an I, right? Because I know a lot of Sherks are with an I.
Yep, and on Facebook it's Sherk 'S. On Instagram it's all 3 words together: Sherk's Guide Service, no apostrophe. I do have a website, but I'm actually going to take it down because honestly, I just can't keep up with the amount of emails and the phone calls I get. And a lot of people also are like public land hunters that are just asking me like for tips and stuff like that. Like, I love all that stuff, but it's actually gotten out of hand. I'm not complaining, but I gotta start cutting back on some of this.
You know, the last guy that called him about stuff like that person was me.
It's a 26-hour-a-day job, and there's only 24 hours. So he's going to have to, something's got to give. Well, listen, man, I tell you what, Steve, I mean, it was a great conversation, and I agree with, both of you guys. We got to get Steve back on because there's a couple more episodes here, like a whole episode just talking about his trail cameras and his surveys. And then he could probably do a whole nother episode just talking about some of the actual, bucks that he's hunted in these Pennsylvania mountains. That would be cool to hear specific stories about some of the good deer that both he and his clients have killed over the years. And I mean, I'm just kind of heartened by the fact that here's a guy outfitting on public land in Pennsylvania, and people know that they're not coming in to shoot 160, 180 inch bucks. People know that they're coming in to shoot maybe 120, 130 inch deer, and they're going to be thrilled with that, and they're gladly coming here and plunking down their money and going and doing the long hikes and the all-day sits, and he's booking out and literally selling out like a year in advance. This guy is awesome, man.
Thank you. Yeah, honestly, I just think it's because I'm kind of a league in my own right now. There's not a lot of these kind of hunts available, and I think a lot of people just want to be challenged and they want something a little bit different. And it's like I said, as of right now, it's really been working out. So,
well, if it keeps on working out, John and I may start our own operation to compete with you. I already know what we're going to call it, John. It's going to be hard ass hunting, and it's going to be if you want to work hard and have a big reward when you succeed, you come hunt with us. And anyway, we won't really do that to you, Steve. We're going to let you have the corner on it. Steve Sherk's Guide Service is a category of one. It's a one-of-a-kind. That's the marketing for you, Steve. It's a one-of-a-kind public land bow hunting experience in the wilds of Pennsylvania. So, all right. Well, listen, man, thanks so much for having us. John, thanks for the idea. Thanks for saving us. So we had an episode for this week. I didn't want to disappoint all the kids at home and not have a bow hunting podcast for this week.
Well, and it turned out, in my opinion, to be a great one. So I appreciate it, Steve.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, guys. I'm a huge fan, and I definitely hope to get back with you. I'd love to chat again.
Thanks for downloading the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Petersen's Bowhunting magazine on your local newsstand or connect with us online at bowhuntingmag.com.